we're gonna jump right to it. So, you're from Flint, correct?
Yep, I'm born and raised Flint, Michigan.
Tell us a little bit about Flint back when you were growing up, and what some of the challenges were as a youth.
Actually, Flint was a pretty cool place growing up. The automotive industry was very strong, so jobs were plentiful. Jobs were plentiful that paid pretty well, where people could take care of their families. At the peak, auto industry employed 80,000 plus people in the Flint community.
Wow.
When those jobs left, the city spiraled obviously in a downward motion because economically, the impact of people losing that many jobs, it hurt the cities and the city's economy. With that, the population dwindled, and we kind of in a place where we have Flint today as a lot of urban communities that are impoverished, that have a lot of struggles. Crack cocaine in the 80s obviously had a terrible impact on our community. And when you combine that with the loss of jobs, things develop in the worst way.
Yes, sir. And as you were talking, that sounds kind of like a parallel to Detroit, to my hometown
Oh
in
yeah.
Detroit. Similar pattern when the main employer, the main industry, you know, cutbacks. Combine that with with the drugs, and then it led to population going down and crime going up. So I definitely can relate. Now, um, skipping all the way ahead to having been incarcerated. Let's say you were putting out a book on your life. What what would you title that chapter in your life when you were incarcerated? And kind of talk a little bit about why you would title that chapter. What would you title it?
It's funny you asked me that. May of last year, I actually published a book, and I kind of pushed it to the side primarily because of COVID reasons. The
Is
book
that the
was
concrete lies and abstract truths, or that was just
that
separate?
exactly concrete lies
Okay.
and abstract truths is the title of the book. I pushed the book to the side because of COVID. There were so many people falling ill, so many people being impacted in the worst way because family members were falling away, the loss of lives. I just put the book back on the shelf and didn't do anything with it. It was released March. A few days later, COVID hit hard and shut the country and the world down. So I really just had to push it to the side. I couldn't be insensitive to promote a book under these conditions, under these times. So I just pushed it to the side. I bring up the book because the book is 100% written while I was away in prison.
Oh wow.
So the
Okay.
book, the material that you find, the content you find in the book is roughly 25, 30 years old. I've been out of prison almost 20 years now, and all of that information and all of those creative things I had are really old. The only things that are fresh is about the author and the back cover of the book. So if I had to name that chapter or any chapter of my life, it would be concrete lies and abstract truths. And people always ask me, what does that mean? What is a concrete lie and what is the abstract truth? Well, if you look at society today, and I recently shared on social media that, there is a lot of deception on social media. There is not probably anything that you can 100% factually or actually say, this is 100% what it is. Everything is very misleading. So when you look at a concrete lie and an abstract truth, that's just the society we live in today. That's just the political landscape. That's the culture where people can't feel comfortable with just saying, hey, here's the truth. Here's the flat out black and white truth, no gray areas. Here's what it is. There's always a tweak, adjustment, or leaving out information that makes it a concrete lie.
Because there's a lot of gray areas.
A lot, so many in all aspects of life. So for me, if I had to describe my life in the title of a chapter, it'd be Concrete Lies and Abstract Truths.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. Now talk a little bit about the Ignite program and your current work.
Back roughly almost 3 years ago, Genesee County Sheriff Swanson had a vision. Now, ironically, Sheriff Swanson and I met almost 30 years ago when he was a rookie deputy in the Genesee County Jail, and I was a resident there. So fast forward 25, 26 years later, he shared this idea with me, Sherrod Piggy, and John L. Allen Bay. It was called Ignite. Inmates grow naturally, intentionally through education. And the first 5-6 minutes of he sharing the concept, I was blown away. I said, with all the different services, the different programs, I worked in restorative justice areas, in prison reentry, criminal justice. I had to say, dude, you got the best concept. Jail reform doesn't exist. Education in the jail doesn't exist. So not only was this fresh and innovative and brand new, there was a huge need. So his idea was to not have the Genesee County Jail as a holding place anymore, but as an educational center to reduce and break recidivism. Over almost 30 years, he's worked for the Genesee County Sheriff's Office. Like a lot of it, he saw the revolving door. He saw participants leave, come back a week later, come back a month later, come back next summer, come back years and years over and over. Not only did he also see and recognize, like many of us do, he started to see the generational impact and a generational culture associated with incarceration. Most often, intentionally, unintentionally, consciously, and unconsciously, parents mimic and follow the paths of their children. So it's not uncommon to see a dad that is in prison where his father has been in prison, his son has been in prison. It's not uncommon to see a dad in jail, his dad has been in jail, his son has been in jail, as well as cousins, uncles, etc. So to address that generational struggle, along with addressing the recidivism rates, Ignite is necessary. So we had a ribbon cutting September 8th, 2020. And actually, at that point, we had nothing. We had a concept, we had a ribbon cutting, and we said—
nothing as far as like funding?
We did not have funding. We did not have hard programming in place, but that was okay because we had the commitment, we had the passion, we had the compassion, and we said, we can build the program out with volunteers, with staff from the sheriff's office, and then the funding will come once we're able to show outcomes. So as we developed and built the program out over those next few months, we were able to bring on some outstanding partners. I was able to reach out and connect with Huntington Bank, Elga Credit Union. Both teaches financial literacy, and Huntington offers entrepreneur workshops. Now, one of the interesting things about the financial literacy, when you're looking at programs and you're trying to develop a program, it's almost hard to impossible to develop a program where there's a one size fits all. You have to really meet and reach each participant where they are as individuals. That's where you have the most successful outcomes. Now, one thing about the financial literacy piece, that's a piece that we all need. We all need some coaching or some relearning or some refreshment in regards to how can I increase my credit score? What can I do to budget better? What can I do to plan financially better? Now, what makes it even more interesting for the jail population is that a great deal of people who reside in jail and prison suffer from identity theft. Unfortunately, many are victims from people they know, friends and family members. So it was important to give the participants in the jail the education to say, okay, what are the little things I can do, which is not much from jail, but what are the little things I can do now to examine, monitor my credit score, and protect my identity? And also, when I'm back in the community, how can I address those things? So let me give you an example. So say you have a person who spent 6 months in jail for DUI. They were employed, they had a comfortable salary, hourly pay, maybe a homeowner, purchasing a car. They go to jail for 6 months. Who's there to pay their bills? If no one, a person that made a mistake by having too many alcoholic beverages to drink, ended up jail, now comes back to the community in an impoverished place. So somebody that may have been employed and well employed, that had a credit score of 700, 720, now comes back to the community where their bills have not been paid for 6 months. Their credit score is now taking a nosedive. Now, why is that even more significant? Your credit score impacts everything you do. Renting a home, purchasing a car,
Purchasing a
leasing a
house.
home, buying a car, leasing a car, as well as with employers. A great deal of employers now do credit background checks. So it impacts everything for success for a person coming back to the community. Now, going back to your initial question, so we had to build it out. We were confident we'd do that. We brought on the local college, my community college is a partner. National Hockey League Alumni Association is a partner. National Football League Alumni Association is a partner. So we built it out. So once we were able to show, okay, these are the effective steps. These are the pieces to the program. Here are the outcomes. Here are the graduates from the program. Here are the graduates that, hey, they can tell you better than myself or Sheriff Swanson or Captain Goo or Johnny Allen Bay. Listen to the participants and their testimonies to say, hey, this is how Ignite changed my life. This is how I've benefited from Ignite. So now we have the outcomes. Now the funding is coming. So we did it kind of in reverse, but not in a bad way, because most people look for the funding, then based on the funding, look at what steps they can do. Where we
said, you guys had to prove yourselves and show that, X plus Y, equals Z. That's why we need the funding so we can continue to impact that formula. Okay.
And it was impactful because, again, there are no real educational programming for people who reside in a jail anywhere. Ignite is brand new. We were the first to come up with any real educational efforts in the jail. And it's been awesome. Sheriff Swanson announced two Wednesdays ago that we have a partnership with Minnesota. Sheriff Hutchinson and Sheriff Chris Swanson have now connected the two communities to bring Ignite to the Minneapolis area.
The Hennepin County or somewhere outside of Hennepin County?
Yep, Hennepin County.
Okay.
Yep. So people are starting to recognize and see the great work. They're starting to call us. You can do a Google search of Ignite, Genesee County Sheriff's Office, Chris Swanson, John Allen Bay, myself. And I'm really proud to be with a great group of people that are committed to make cultural change. I know you and I connected based on a post I put on LinkedIn recently.
Yes, sir.
And I thought it would generate some noise, but I did not realize it was going to make this much noise. There are about 11,000 reactions now.
Oh, wow.
1,000 comments. And as you saw, I basically put my prison ID from maybe about 2001. And I put my sheriff's identification that I received this year and posted them together to show people that there can be a culture change, that somebody with history as far as jail and prison can give back and can support a sheriff's office. Now, it got interesting, and I had made people clear that, no, I'm not LEO. I'm not law enforcement officer. I don't carry a gun. I don't arrest. I don't patrol the streets. My role is to work and support the residents in the Genesee County Jail as a coach, mentor, advisor, educator, as well as those same things for Sheriff Swanson and his staff. Now, what makes it cool is that over the 20 years I've been out of prison, when Sheriff Swanson and I connected again about 2.5, 3 years ago, he initially didn't recognize me in that meeting. So as he introduced himself, I said, hey, you know me? He's like, what? I'm like, you know me? He's like, wait a minute, know you from where? I said, I was a resident here. He was like, 1990, such and such. on floor such and such when I was working with Deputy Cherry, blah, blah, blah. He remembered instantly once I said that.
Oh,
He said,
good.
dude, how did you get here from here? And I explained to him, that I was released New Year's Eve, December 31st that year, and then how much it was a struggle. That Friday I was released. That Tuesday I was sitting in class as a student at the local college. And it was a really tough transition. There are services that support people being released from jail and prison all over the place. Now, 20 years ago, those things didn't exist.
Like that, yeah, yeah.
You were hard pressed, and it was almost 0 to impossible chances of you finding employment. The culture was a difficult one. One of the first things faculty and staff told me when I became a student at the college was, what the F are you doing here? You will never graduate. And as I always share this with people when I communicate, is that was significant for a couple of different reasons. Mean, but definitely significant. First piece of significance, that they were 100% right. I hadn't been a traditional student in a formal setting in more than a decade and a half. The MDOC does a wonderful job now of preparing people from release in Michigan prisons, but back then there was nothing. There was nothing available to educate better yourself. So when I left prison, I left literally with just a GED and no real other skills. So college administrators were 100% right. I didn't have any of the basics to show that I could be successful as a college student. They were 100% right. The next significant thing is that was the hard punch to the jaw for me to say, okay, don't give up. Fight the best fight. You will get there, regardless of how much of a struggle it is. That was the thing that struck, or also maybe even gave the fuel to my fire, but also struck the fire to provide me the motivation to say, you know what, I'm gonna show different. I won't reoffend. I'll make it, which was tough. Like I said, back then, a lot of people fell into a cycle of that revolving door going back to jail and prison because they didn't have access. They couldn't find housing. They couldn't find income. They couldn't find jobs. And a lot of people try to negate this or minimize it, but I always say, go without an income for a year. That's any stable, rational thinking, balanced person. Go without an income for a year. Watch how desperately insane your thinking will go when you are trying to figure out how to take care of yourself and take care of your family.
Yes. And to add to that, even getting financial aid when a person has a felony on their record is not so simple either. So that's, you're working on a deficit at the same time you have additional barriers when you get out too. But yeah, that's a good
And all those barriers are, a lot of them have scaled down, scaled back, or even scaled away. We still have work to do. Somebody made a post and I thought it was really interesting. They basically said, I don't know if I could trust someone who's been in prison as someone that can police the community. And I've never had interest in want to be a police officer or carrying a gun or patrolling our community. But the more and more I thought about it, it kind of makes sense to have those people to at least have a voice in those type of things because they've been there and done that. It's also significant because every person should have the ability to police our community. So when I say that, is that for you in the area you live, you should be able to walk down the street and do a checks and balances to see how your neighbors are, see if things are well. So I don't mean necessarily always in a traditional police officer way, but it's everybody's responsibility to police our communities. Just those roles and those levels would just be different. But if we all do that collectively, think how much safer our communities are, think of how much more healthy connectedness as community members we have with law enforcement. Think about how much more responsible those relationships are. So it just brings about a great deal of balance and health for everyone.
Yes, yes. And you know, from a flip side as well, it's kind of like the village raising the child. You know, the old school neighborhood watches, which kind of, you know, melted away. Now it's more like people living in their own silo. The people siloed off in their neighborhoods. You don't know who goes in, who goes out. So that would definitely help with community policing as well.
Of course.
Now, what type of advice would you give any individual, any young man or woman that's preparing to get out? They've been locked up, you know, for a couple of years, a few years, and now, you know, they see that end date is coming up. What kind of advice would you give them to kind of help them hit the ground running, so to speak?
I would say the first thing is do a real internal check and balance, do a real internal investigation, do a real internal understanding of who you are, what you've been as a person, and most importantly, where you want to go. Because today's culture is so supportive that, again, it's not what it was 15, 20, 25 years ago. If a person wants to get out of jail or prison and live the most healthiest lifestyle, comfortably, financially, emotionally, in behavior, conduct, and character, it can happen because there are so many support systems. So I would say it's primarily where that person passion lies, where their heart lies, and where they want to go in life, because every resource is available now. Which, again, don't get me wrong, there's still a great deal of work to be done, but things are much better than it's ever been. And there are enough services, again, still work to be done, but there are enough services that provide the support for a person to be successful. So I would say it's really an internal check and balance.
Okay, and you know, speaking of, you know, improved services, I know for Colorado Department of Corrections, when people get out now, they have a PO assigned to them, of course, but they also have a retention specialist. They get GED paid for. They get counseling services, telecounseling right now. So there's a lot more, you know, services in place than 20, 25 years ago. That's for sure. You know. Now for viewers that's just tuning in, kind of give a plug as far as how and when they'd be able to get their hands on Concrete Lies and Abstract Truths.
Actually, the book is available. You can find it on Amazon. And actually, there are I think there's about 31, 32 reviews, some excellent reviews. The readers have really, really put some thought into the reviews and I would say, and I hate to say this like this because it may sound a little strange, some of the reviews may be even more thought-provoking than the book itself. People really, really poured their heart into the reviews. But they definitely can find it on Amazon. They can reach out to me. I can provide hard copies. There are a few different websites where you can find it. So if someone wanted to reach out to me, they can send me an email, percy.glover@outlook.com. I can provide
Say it one more time.
It's my first and last name, percy.glover@outlook.com. And it'll be easier just
Glover@outlook.com.
Yep, Outlook, outlook.com. And because it's available in a handful of different places, it'd probably just be easier for me just to push a person to the best area for them to make a purchase. Again, the book for me is a self-reflection. It is poetic therapy. During that time of incarceration, writing gave me an opportunity to vent and release on personal things that I have struggled with things I saw in the news and the media at that time, things I wanted to see happen in my life once I was released from prison. So it's just a collective poetic memoir of my thoughts, feelings, visions, of things that I personally experienced or things that I've heard, witnessed, or saw in the news and media. You know, it's really raw. It's really gritty. I'm almost 50 years old. So this book was written when I was early and mid 20s. And it was funny because some of those things when you're young, you think a little more radical. You know, so some of the things I had to say, well, okay, for this day and age of culture, that might be a little too intense for the people. But I tried not to take too much out of the book, but I also intentionally kept it small. There's about 100 pages. I hate to say it these days, with technology, I think probably the most read book today is Facebook. And I'm not saying that to be funny, but I don't think with all the technology and the advancement of technology that reading is, unless it's for a learning purpose or for school, I don't think people use it as a high form of entertainment anymore. So I kept the book really small to attract readers. And I think I did a good job of that. I think I did a great job of that, you know, because you're not overwhelmed. You know, the short stories, the poems aren't too lengthy, not too comprehensive where a person feel like they got to take out hours of the day or a week or two to finish a 400 or 500 page book, which obviously that's not bad. But I wanted to keep it small to attract readers, to also attract readers of all ages. A lot of emotion, a lot of interesting creativity. One of the things I had to say to myself as I began writing, being a student of all things, I found out when I was in prison how much I didn't know. So I walked into prison as a dropout. I completed the 10th grade, but I never really made any traction in the 11th grade. So I walked into prison as a high school dropout who actually received their GED while going through pretrial services in the county jail right before I was shipped to prison. So as I found out that, hey, Percy, you don't know a lot. You haven't been exposed to a lot. You know, I wanted to get as much information I could. So I read 4, 5, 6 books a day, every day for years. So when I started to write, there was so much information in my head that it started to mesh. So I have all these different quotes, can't remember which book it came from what author, from what whoever. So when I wanted to write, I started to feel like, okay, who do I sound like? I wanted to create my own voice and have my own style. So when you hear the term, there's nothing new under the sun, there truly isn't. Whatever creativity you had, somebody probably had at some point, whether they made steps towards it or not. So in writing, you see that, hey, we have all these thoughts, but we have to understand what are our own thoughts and what are things that we've read by someone else. So I had to really, really push the envelope as it relates to creativity to not sound like anyone else. And I think I also did a great job of that. I think it's a pretty interesting read. And I think for anybody that makes a purchase, I think they will really enjoy it.
I'm definitely looking forward to it. I know I seen a quote on I believe on your LinkedIn post, and it was along the lines of I think it was from Glenn E. Martin. It said those closest to the problem are the closest to the solution. And when I read that, like that really has me looking forward to reading the whole book from cover to cover, because Percy, having worked in the largest youth correctional facility in Colorado, I noticed that some of the young men that were locked up there, especially those that were gang affiliated, a lot of them had the same 1 or 2 books in their cells. And these are pretty lengthy books. One was like 40 Laws of Power. Another one was My Bloody Life. And these aren't 50-page books. These are like pretty lengthy books. So if they have the time to read books of that nature, no knock on those books, but I really feel they could benefit from reading your book. And I'm looking forward to reaching out to some people at my old facility and see if some of the BHS, that's behavioral health specialists, they're like therapists there, if they can kind of add that to some of their group sessions where they can assign that book, have them read and do some groups on your book, if you don't mind, that is.
It's definitely self-reflection, poetic therapeutic memoir, but it's also coming of age. You know, there are some things that talks about fatherhood. There are things that talks about personal romantic relationships. There's things about sexual health. There's things about rape, incest. So there are really some real hardcore coming of age stories that potentially could support every young person's thinking and provoking thought on, you know what, where do I want to go in life? Who do I want to be? Because primarily for young people, one of the biggest things that young people lack is exposure.
Thanks.
They have a difficult time identifying where, what, how they want to go in life because they haven't been exposed enough. They haven't been exposed enough. And sometimes as adult and as a society, we beat up a little too hard on young people when we should be supporting and doing a better job of exposing them to things that would trigger a passion. Myself, you, everybody. How many jobs do we have till we've said, you know what, this is the job. This is the area I like. This is the area I love. We don't know until we are invested in it and we see it, feel it, experience and say, this is it. This is what I want to do. But a great deal of time, our kids lack exposure. And I think it was one second aspect of it is, I don't think people always understand or recognize that if you have one industry, that there are several branches to the tree of that industry. So for example, if I am interested in becoming a professional basketball player, there's everything from coaches, trainers, referees,
GMs.
announcers. Like, people don't understand that there are different options to just playing basketball. If I am this passionate about the sport, an NBA referee makes $400,000+ a year. That's awesome money for about 4 months of work a year.
True. And they get to be immersed in the game at all
And
times.
you travel, you're seeing different places of the country, you're seeing different pieces of the world. So that's just one example of jobs. Now, okay, you may not be blessed to be able to make $300 million over your career like a Shaq or a Kobe Bryant, but $400,000 or $500,000 a year that is managed well over a 10, 15-year span, I think anybody should be pretty well off, you know. But that's just one example that, again, there are so many limbs and there's so many branches to the tree when it comes to opportunity in different sectors and industries that we don't do a great job of helping our young people understand. It's like a young person that wanted to be a musician, a singer, or a rapper. If you are that passionate and that intentionally passionate about music, there are so many other opportunities around music where you can support yourself financially and you can support your heart's passion. So I think we missed the mark great time by not opening the window wide enough for our young people to see how bright the sunshine is outside. And we have to do a better job at that.
Yes, sir. That's one of the things that keeps me going with this podcast. Like you mentioned, for example, a lot of the viewers, they're student athletes. So I brought in a young lady, Nikita Gantz. She was like one of the only few females in Division I that were director of basketball operations at a D1 basketball program. She was a former college basketball player. So just exposing some of the young viewers to something beyond just directly playing the game, but hey, you can do other things connected to the game. You can still be around the game, enjoy it, make good money, earn a good living.
Of course, of course.
Now, Percy, got two more questions for you, not to hold you up. If you were doing a movie about your life story, can't play yourself, which actor would play Percy Glover and why? Put you on the
Which
spot.
actor? Wow, that's an interesting question. I have so many favorite actors. Lorenz Tate, Cuba Gooding Jr., Morris Chestnut, Idris Elba. I don't know, but I would say the person who's fresh on my mind is Idris Elba, because I'm looking at his body of work and I'm looking and seeing how diverse it's becoming. If you see him in Thor, one of the Avenger movies,
The
or
Wire.
one of the Tyler Perry movies, or Takers. He just has, he is really developing an interesting diversity of interesting,
Whole
diverse
portfolio, just
portfolio
different
of,
roles. Yeah,
man, his body of work is just becoming amazing. And the transition in his body of work from one movie to the next movie is so unique and diversified. I think that he will be the best person just because of my transition has been a very interesting one in regards to high school dropout, jail, prison, coming back to the community, coming back to a community during a time where it was almost impossible to get education. It was almost impossible to find a job, and having worked in places that still are not always common. I worked at a community college, I worked at a university, I worked at the State Appellate Defender's Office, I worked as a contractor for the Michigan Department of Corrections,
hey,
where
that's different.
very different, where my initial assignment, it was a cubicle setting at Flint Parole, and I was 3 cubicles away from my former parole officer. So very, very interesting, a lot of interesting dynamics that I've been able to enjoy since I've been released from prison. You know, I've also worked as a program manager for Michigan Works, General Motors. So a lot of different aspects to me professionally that, again, is not common with people in general, but definitely not common with people who have experienced the law.
In closing, I want to share with some of the viewers, you could have easily did your time, came out, got a couple gigs from a staffing agency, labor ready, and not went back in and been a success story technically, but you took it to the next level of getting out, but also giving back and helping out others, paying it forward. So, Mr. Percy Glover, I want to thank you for taking time out of your schedule to come on Heavy Brand Podcast. Continual blessings to you and your work. Thank you so much, sir.
Man, thank you so much. You keep considering our young people and do everything you can support them, and feel free to reach out. Even though I'm in Michigan, we can do a lot of things remotely. I'm always encouraged to support our young people, because I understand that I needed a hard, swift kick in my butt at one point in time, and I didn't get it, which if maybe I had, it may have impacted me. I also needed encouragement, advice. So, I know our young people need special things that are specific and unique for them as individuals. So I thank you, my brother.
We shall meet again.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much.
Yes, sir.